entertaining talking sports.
What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. And in this video, I'm going to dive into the big news of the day. I also want to talk about Saquon Barkley. But first, we're going to start with the big news of the day. That, of course, being the news that came out about Daniel Jones. And, of course, I read this on Twitter from Jordan Renan, along with a lot of other New York Giants beat writers, talking about the quote from Joe Judge, who basically stated that Daniel Jones now has suffered a second lower leg injury on his opposite leg, I believe, that will probably keep him out of this week's contest Sunday night against the Cleveland Browns. And, of course, we saw that this past Sunday, in which Daniel Jones was limping to the huddle, and then they eventually brought Colt McCoy in. Jordan Renan also went on to say that in today's practice, Daniel Jones did participate, but he looked somewhat limited, and Colt McCoy got more first-team reps than in the previous week. Of course, Jones got a lot of the first-team reps leading up into this week, which gave us a lot of confidence that he would be suiting up for the New York Giants. Also, Joe Judge came out and talked about that he is leaving open the possibility that Colt McCoy could be used in some way, shape, or form in a specific role if they do decide to start Daniel Jones and use him in certain packages. Well, this past week, he kind of said the same thing, and we never saw it. Now, of course, the New York Giants couldn't get any flow to the offense. They didn't pass the opposing 50 until that drive in which they scored that touchdown in the second half. So maybe they planned on doing it this week, or maybe the New York Giants are trying to confuse their opponent, and they don't want to tip their hand as to who will start and how they're going to use their quarterbacks with Daniel Jones clearly limited. But based off of last week's performance with Daniel Jones, if Daniel Jones is not 100%, or he's at least not close to 100%, and you can't use the full repertoire, he's a very limited quarterback, at least at this point in time with the weapons on this football team. And it's probably in the New York Giants' best interest for Daniel Jones' health and in terms of, him progressing as a quarterback and to win this football game to start Colt McCoy. We saw what Daniel Jones is when he can't move, when he's immobile. He's not the same quarterback. He's not even close. And I would guess at this point in time, especially with the second leg injury, that it's in the New York Giants' best interest in terms of winning this football game of getting a 100% Colt McCoy over a 50 or 60% Daniel Jones. Now, if Daniel Jones is mobile, if he could extend plays, which he did to some capacity in the past game, at least early on in the game, before, he started to slow down after taking all those hits, have at it. But they couldn't use the RPO at all in that contest. The Arizona Cardinals came out with a 4-4 defense, and the Giants had no threat in terms of the RPO, in terms of the run game. They were a very predictable offense, which is what they'll be with Colt McCoy. But Daniel Jones was not the same quarterback. It was clearly evident. And if that's the case this week, you have no choice but to start Colt McCoy. And Colt McCoy could be the starter going forward for the rest of the year. We're going to have to wait and see how serious this injury is and how Daniel Jones responds. A lot of people pointed to Joe Judge this past week and said that he made a mistake starting him. And I think it was at least fair to be critical of it based off the way that Daniel Jones looked in this contest, especially later in the game when he was limping to the huddle. I thought it was fair to at least question Joe Judge's judgment in starting Daniel Jones in this game. But based off the things I'm hearing and going up against Cleveland, I think the New York Giants will more than likely start Colt McCoy. And if you're starting Colt McCoy, I think you're coming out with the same game plan you've pretty much come out with every week the past 6 weeks. And for the most part, it's worked in a lot of these games. And that is a run-heavy approach to play fundamentally sound football. Now, if the Giants play sloppy special teams, they have no chance. If the Giants play bad on defense, they have no chance. They have to stop the run against Cleveland. They have to put forth an unbelievable effort on defense to win this game. We know that Colt McCoy is limited. We know that Colt McCoy is not going to make a ton of plays. In that game against Seattle, they focused strictly on the run. They ran for 190 yards, and the Giants are going to have to play smash-mouth football. They're going to have to win in the trenches, and they're going to have to out-game plan their opponent. Could they win? Absolutely. They beat Seattle. Why can't they beat Cleveland? But they got to play near flawless football to win this game. And the defense is going to have to create turnovers, and they cannot turn the football over. It's unfortunate in a year where you want to see Daniel Jones progress. You want to see these last 3 games of him, get more acclimated to the scheme if they're going to bring Jason Garrett back, and that remains to be seen. And I'll talk more about Saquon Barkley as this video goes along. But, yeah, every game is very important to the growth and development of your young quarterback. But by the same token, you cannot force him out there if he's not a go. And if he cannot do the things he's capable of doing, he hurts the football team. And we saw that last week. So I think the Giants will more than likely go with McCoy unless Daniel Jones can move the way that he's capable of moving when he's 100% healthy. So expect to see Colt McCoy Sunday night against the Cleveland Browns. The other thing I wanted to talk about today was Saquon Barkley. Every time I do a stream, and this isn't even advocating to keep Saquon Barkley, but it's kind of to talk about the importance that he has on this offense, not just in the running game, but in the passing game for the New York Giants. Every time I do a stream, people talk about, when are we going to trade Saquon Barkley? What could we get for Saquon Barkley? And I understand they're reluctant to potentially pay a running back a lot of money. I completely understand that, especially if you're going to bring back the quarterback in Daniel Jones, tying up 12 to 15% of your cap going forward. And to me, it is very probable if you bring back Daniel Jones, in the end, there's a good chance Saquon Barkley will not be here long term. However, if you decide to go with a new quarterback, which will not happen this offseason, but I'm saying in the future, it's more likely that you would bring back Saquon Barkley to help provide for that younger quarterback. And what he's done for Daniel Jones since Daniel Jones has been here, all you have to do is look at the numbers, and it's not scheme dependent. Since Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones have played together, they've had 10 starts together. In those starts, Daniel Jones is a near Pro Bowl level quarterback if you just look at the numbers. The yards are nearly identical, even though he's had 14 starts without him, 10 with him. The yards, I think he has 60 less yards in the 10 starts. The touchdowns, he has 23 touchdown passes in 10 starts with Saquon Barkley and only 8 interceptions. In the 14 starts without him, he has 9 touchdowns and 13 picks in almost a season's worth of games. And you may look at that and you may say, well, that's not good. Daniel Jones can't get the job done without Saquon Barkley. But let's be fair. It's not like Daniel Jones has a lot of weapons to begin with. And Saquon Barkley is obviously his premium weapon on this offense. I think it also speaks to Jason Garrett. For all the people that want to say it is strictly the scheme, well, when you take that piece out of this offense, it makes the New York Giants a completely different offense. You go back, you look at that Pittsburgh Steelers game. It is the most yards we've thrown for in a game all year. And it is the only game in which Saquon Barkley played the whole contest. And yes, in that game, Saquon Barkley was not productive. He got stuffed at the line of scrimmage. He didn't run for very many yards, and we were very reliant on Daniel Jones' arm in that game. But just the threat, having Saquon Barkley on this roster and having them stack the box, changes the passing game. Daniel Jones this year has 8 touchdown passes. 2 came in that game. 25% of his touchdown passes came in one game with Saquon Barkley. The one game Saquon Barkley played throughout against the league's best defense. So Saquon Barkley is instrumental in the growth of Daniel Jones. There's no denying it. There's no doubt about it. And we'll have to wait and see if he's 100% next year. But when you think about it and you look at it, if Saquon Barkley does come back 100% healthy next year, it should dramatically help Daniel Jones. And I do think Saquon Barkley going down this year completely changed the offensive strategy of the New York Giants. I think they would have tried to come out with a pretty run-heavy approach, but I think it would have opened up the pass game a lot more for this New York Giants team. Last year in the game, in 3 games in Shermer's scheme, Daniel Jones threw for 3 touchdowns and 6 interceptions in the games in which Saquon Barkley started, one of which was a game against the Washington football team. And in that game, the New York Giants threw for 1 touchdown and 2 picks. They later played that same Washington team later in the season, albeit Daniel Jones had more experience. Jones went on to throw 5 touchdowns and no picks, I believe, against that Washington team with Saquon Barkley in the lineup. He makes a huge difference for this offense, and an offense that lacks weaponry. So for everybody that is saying, let's get rid of Saquon Barkley, I'm going to tell you this. If you do that, and that's your opinion, you're starting a brand new rebuild. But because without Saquon Barkley, Daniel Jones plays like a backup quarterback. 9 touchdowns, 13 picks, and 14 starts. It's just facts. It's what the numbers say. And, of course, we definitely could use another wide receiver in this offense. But Barkley is going to be a huge part of this New York Giants team in 2021 if we're headed towards the playoffs. We need him, and we need him back healthy. As always, guys, if you like what you watch, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.